Hello, and welcome to our Build Along. I'm Emily Fields, an engineering leader here at Retool. Today, we're going to start with a roundup of what's new for builders in Retool before we do 2 live builds with Kent on our design team. Afterwards, we'll do a live Q&A. If you have questions at any point, you can drop them in the chat. We want Retool apps to be fully customizable and beautiful by default, whether you're building an internal tool for just one person or an external portal for thousands. And a lot of that comes down to styling. Our themes feature lets you set reusable styling properties and apply them across your organization. Today, we're expanding that feature with application-level themes. This allows you to quickly configure your styles side by side as you build, whether that be setting default primary and secondary colors, border radius, or configuring one of our new capabilities like typography. Kent will show you how to best use app and org themes in the build session later on. While theming provides builders more control and consistency across their apps, we've also added support for new layout patterns like slide-out drawers and modals. Modals are no longer coupled to buttons. They can be triggered to show or hide from any event handler. And they have more customization options too, like built-in full-screen support. Like our new table component earlier this year, we rebuilt all of our repeatable patterns from the ground up to enhance performance, aesthetics, and developer ease of use. The new list view uses our custom virtualization framework so it's performant out of the box, regardless of the size of your data. It's available in vertical, horizontal, and grid mode to support any layout you might need. And working with our new list views is easier than ever thanks to intelligent presets and scope access to variables like item. One of the components you'll see today is the new key value, not to be confused with the old one, which looks like an ugly reference table from your high school chemistry textbook or something. The new key value is highly configurable, supporting all of the same format options as table and multiple layout modes like single, multi-column, and wrap. It intelligently responds to the shape of your data, making it easy and fast to integrate into your apps. And it's dynamic by default. No matter what JSON object you throw at it, it's going to generate the right formatting options for you. Finally, I'm going to cover some improvements to the hardest working component at Retool, our table. In the past few months, we've shipped some major new improvements, like expandable rows. With expandable rows, you get a collapsible container with access to row-level scope. Your tables look cleaner, and your users can drill down into more detail when they need to. We've added a ton of other functionality too, like row grouping and aggregation, as well as new column types like button, progress, phone number, and more. In addition to adding new components to our library, we always want you to have an escape hatch in code. We're excited to announce an upcoming beta for a new custom components experience, which includes hot reloading, hooks to access Retool state and event handlers, library management across your organization, and a lot more. And that's it, a ton of new features for customizing your Retool apps, with more on the way. But the best way to see what's new in Retool is to build. So I'm going to pass you over to Kent.
Thanks, Emily. Hi, I'm Kent, and today I'm going to be walking us through 2 Retool applications. These apps were designed to give context on all of the new features and experiences Emily mentioned, and to share how they enable us to take Retool UIs farther than ever before. As a quick note before we get started, there's no custom CSS in any of these apps. All of this is possible with Retool's native components and out-of-the-box styling. Let's dive into our first app, Bug Tool. As engineering teams, we keep track of, prioritize, and communicate about our work in issue tracking software, like Jira or Linear. Bug Tool is an issue tracking app built inside of Retool, and it's really quite powerful. We can see on the homepage here, we have this full height and full width table. We can see our different issues and sort on different properties. We can drill down into just the issues assigned to me. And we can, of course, search across all of our issues, as well as add new issues. There's a lot going on in this app, but I want to focus on the table first. This table has a lot of really powerful features that come out of the box with Retool's new table. One of those we haven't shown yet is the ability to expand rows and drill down into content within one particular table row. Here, we see more information about our issue, the activity feed, some metadata, and we have the ability to take action, like copy a branch name or an issue ID. How do we go about building something like this in Retool? That's what we're going to do now. So to start, I'm going to jump into edit mode and navigate down to the build along section. This app is composed of a sidebar with a full screen multi-view container on the canvas. We have this empty container ready for building now. So let's start where all good Retool apps start, with a table. Let's put a table onto the canvas, and we can see that this table doesn't have quite the effect that the other table had. Why is that? Mostly it's due to layout and spacing. Even if we maximize the dimensions of this table within the container, double-click on the right-hand side, drag it all the way down, it's still not going to get us quite there. That's because there's still going to be margin and padding around the outside. Also, the height we set the table to will likely not work for every browser window that tries to access this app. What we really want to do is tell Retool to use all of the available space for this component. We can do that now by enabling the expand contents to fit property of this container. This setting is available on the main canvas and on any container with a single component. When we expand contents to fit inside of this container, our table immediately looks a lot better. All of the margin and padding is removed, and we use the full height of the viewport. Let's get this sample data out of here and start working on a table based on our issue data. One thing that I immediately notice is that Retool has very sensibly defaulted the type of the ID column to a number. That makes sense. IDs are usually numbers. But in this case, because I'm familiar with the data, I know that our IDs are actually strings. So I'm going to change that to a string, and we're going to show this whole ID. Now that we have this, I'm going to work on resizing some of these columns, which is usually a safe place to start when we're trying to make a table look good. Now, this description column is going to give me some trouble. There's just too much text here, and I don't think we need it inside of our table. Let's get rid of it for now. Next, I'm going to bring a few of these properties to the left-hand side of the table by dragging them to the top of our column inspector. We'll want completed up there, probably want priority, and maybe I'll grab status as well. Completed is a number. It's actually a percentage, and so it's a real natural fit for the table column type progress, which will render this number as a progress bar. We could do some more customization on this thing, but I really don't think it's necessary. Next up is priority. This has been defaulted to a tag type in the table. Again, a very reasonable guess that Retool made. These do look fine as tags, but there's a lot of tags in this table and a few too many colors. I think we can do something else here to communicate the same information in a better way. Instead of the tag, I'm going to reach for a new table type, and that's going to be the icon table type. Instead of tag, we can go to the table, choose the icon type here, and by default, Retool is going to suggest an icon. But what we actually want to do is dynamically choose one depending on the value that's in this priority column. I have a little mapper ready to go that maps the value of this column, which is the string, low, medium, or high, to the appropriate icon. This looks great. Next, let's think about status. Status is also defaulted to a tag column type. This looks reasonable, but I think we want to keep it tag-like, but first I'm going to get rid of the colors. There's too much going on right now. Assigning tag colors automatically is a property of the table. We're going to remove that. But I think this leads us to a situation where we want a bit more information, a bit more sort of visual indication to differentiate these types from one another. So we'll keep it as a tag, but we're going to want to use an option list. With the option list, if we add one value, we'll be prompted to add all of the values that are present in the data. I've just done that. And so now we have three options: backlog, in progress, and review. What we have looks like tags, but they're a little bit more configurable than the tag is. And the way that we want to configure these is, I think, to add an icon to each one. For the backlog, we'll add this dashed circle icon. For progress, we'll add this partially dashed circle. And for in review, we'll add this clock to indicate it's close to being done. So these now render the icon and the status type. The rest of this is looking pretty good. We can scroll over. We probably want to make tags a little bit wider. Tags, of course, I think makes sense to say as a tag type. But up next is owner. Owner is the person who's assigned to the ticket. And that's a really natural opportunity to use the avatar table column. In our data, owner is an object. So what we have to do here is map the column to the owner's name, item. These avatars give us too many colors. And, we'd really rather have an actual profile picture in here, which we have set in the data. So let me set the image to current source row .owner.image URL. Now, we can see we're rendering the profile picture for every row. Team should be fine, and estimated time is looking fine as well. Right on. Just like that, this is looking pretty good, but let's go back to where we started. We got rid of that description because it was taking up a bit too much space. This is where we want to add those expandable rows in order for us to have a container to add more information that we don't necessarily want to show within the row. So if we select our table, we go to the advanced settings in the top right, we can enable expandable rows. Now each row is going to have this little container below that we can start adding components to. Let's start off by adding some text in here, and maybe we'll set this text to be the current row's title property. We'll use Markdown to make this a little bit bigger, and we'll make this wider. Maybe right below that, we'll add the current row's description, which is what we took out originally. Okay, in order to display the metadata about one of these tickets, we're going to reach for a refreshed component. That's the key value. Before that, I'm actually going to pop a really quick container on here, get rid of the header, set the background color to our canvas, which is a little bit darker than the container color, and then we'll add a key value on here. We're going to get rid of the default data and instead just set it to the value of the current row. So the key value has seen a big refresh. It's now going to automatically parse column types in the same way that the table does. Things like tags and booleans look a lot better out of the box. We have a lot more horizontal space than we realize, so I'm going to take advantage of the key values layout option, auto. Retool will choose 2 columns here, and that's going to look a lot better in preview mode. Last thing we'll add is the activity feed. So let's grab a timeline and pop that next to the metadata. In just a few minutes, we built a table, and really a table experience with these expandable rows that is pretty much on par with what we saw at the start. These table expandable rows give us a lot more options when we need to display content that is related to some of the elements on the screen, but when you don't need to show everything at once. The other way to do that in Retool is, of course, using a modal, much like we have here with our new issue modal. Now, this modal is pretty different to the ones you might have used in Retool, and I'll show you why. If we go over to our component tree, this modal is actually a canvas frame, much like our header, sidebar, or main canvas. Previously with modals in Retool, they were associated with a button. That resulted in a lot of situations where you'd have to have a button on the canvas, hide it, but then programmatically show or display the modal. It's not a great experience. So now the modal frames are added as standalone frames in the app, and they can be programmatically interacted with. There's a lot of convenient default sizes right out of the box with these modals, including one full screen size if we want to take up the entire height and width of the screen. For now, we'll keep this as medium and head back to our table. If you were paying close attention when we added that modal, you would have noticed another new pattern, the drawer. Let's dive into the drawer and see what it lets us do. I'm going to jump over to a different application. This one is called Retool Eats. I don't think we're going to get into the food delivery business, but if we were, we'd have a pretty good place to start here. So let's pick up where we left off, and to answer the question on everyone's mind, what's in our cart? Clicking on this cart button brings a drawer over top of the canvas. Drawers are a really good way to overlay full height content without losing the visual context, like you might by using a page navigation or a full screen modal. Looking at this app, it's taking advantage of a lot of repeatable layouts. We have all of the icons up here in a horizontal layout. We have our promotion cards repeating horizontally, and we have our restaurant grid down here. Let's focus on this restaurant grid, and actually let's use it as an example. Why don't we try to rebuild this inside of Retool? I'm going to do something similar and hop to a blank screen within this app. And I think if we were asked to put this together inside of Retool, we'd be pretty inclined to reach for a table. So on this table, we'll get rid of the demo data and hop right to our restaurant data to see how that works. Frankly, this looks pretty bad. At the very least, why don't we move our image to the top, set it as an image type, and make it a little bit bigger. That's going to look better, especially after we move our columns around. And, technically this might meet the criteria that was given to us, right? Display the restaurants on the canvas. A table can do that. But I don't think it has quite the same visual appeal that the grid did. Let's take it farther. I'm going to get rid of the table, and instead, I'm going to reach for a list view. Like Emily mentioned, we've rebuilt the list view from the ground up. We don't have to worry about indices. We can just access scope variables like item directly. Let's go ahead and give it an iterable object here. And so in this case, I'm going to give it the same restaurant information that we used before. This new list view gives us a lot of layout options right out of the box: vertical, horizontal, and grid. So let's use a grid here. And to be true to the original app, we'll set it to be 4 columns. So our restaurants are objects. So let's grab item.name, and down here, we'll add an image to show our restaurant image. So instead of a kitten, we can go item.image. Nice. Just like that, we've got our new image grid onto our canvas. Again, this is looking much better than the table did, and we could say that this is done, but I think we can take it farther still. If we look at these components, each grid item has a container with a title and an image. These containers have borders. The borders are typically helpful for visually differentiating the components, but in this case, the images are kind of doing that for us. We don't need the borders, so let's get rid of them. I'm also going to move the restaurant name below the image, which will enable us to get rid of the header inside of each container. And lastly, these square images are just a bit too square. So let's change the height to fixed, the width to cover, and reduce the height a bit, and we'll move our title right below. I think there's probably a little bit too much space between each of these images, so we're going to turn off padding on all of these containers. The ability to control padding and margin on all of our components is really allowing a lot wider range of layouts to be made inside of Retool. And the last thing that's catching my eye, these images, they're looking a little bit too sharp compared to the rest of the app. So let's set the border radius on these images to be 8 instead of 4. That looks great. And this is also pretty much what we had on the homepage. So we've talked about repeatable patterns in this application. The images certainly help it look good. The colors stand out. But there's something else that really makes this app feel polished. And that's the typography. Typography is a new setting available in themes. As Emily mentioned earlier, you can also now use app-level themes. So let's check both of these things out. I'm going to go to Settings and down to Theme. Right here, we can change all of the default theming, color, and border properties within an app. We can also control the typography. You can import any font and control the default type sizes. So by combining repeatable layouts, typography, and images, it enables us to build really powerful apps. Maybe we have a shot at food delivery after all. Today, we've reviewed the new expand to fill content setting, the ability to control margin and padding on components, new patterns like modals and drawers, our refreshed key value and list view components, custom typography, and expandable table rows. Combining all of these elements allows us to build apps in Retool that look better than they ever have. I'll share both of the apps we looked at today for you to reference, and as always, we'd love any feedback on what we can do to make building in Retool better. Thanks. Have a great day.